Good morning and welcome to Haynesworth Sinclair Boyd's presentation on the PPP program with an overview, and we're also going to have a specific discussion at the end about the way that this program has application to foreign-owned businesses who are seeking to avail themselves of the program. I'm Frank Davis, shareholder in the business department at Haynesworth Sinclair Boyd. We also have with us this morning Perry McLennan, who is an attorney who does employment work, as well as the applications of the CARES Act and the PPP program. We have Perry here with us today because the PPP is a Paycheck Protection Program, and it's integrally involved with the workforce and maintaining companies' workforces. That is the purpose, primary purpose of the program, to help small businesses, and we'll discuss what that means, keep going during this interesting time. The format this morning is going to be a general overview of the program, which is going to be presented by Perry. We're then going to have a discussion regarding the evolving position of the Small Business Association and the U.S. Treasury as the program relates to foreign-owned businesses, and then we'll have a brief opportunity for question and answer at the end of the program. I encourage you to use the Zoom Q&A feature to write your questions down, given the limited time that we'll have at the end of this program. We have also with us today Bin Wu, who is our market analyst and works closely with our firm on our foreign platform, particularly as it relates to Chinese businesses. We've been very fortunate to support a large number of Chinese firms in their U.S. business efforts, and look forward to growing that relationship with those of you for whom U.S. growth is a focus of their business. With that said, I'll turn it over to Perry McLennan, a member of our employment group, to speak about the PPP program generally.
各位听众，大家早上好。那我们也是了解到，就是说，因为最近呢，就是说大家对中小商业协会的这个 PPP 贷款呢，有很多的疑问呐，或者想法啊，所以呢，我们这边呢会在第一时间呢，就是办了今天的这一个讲座，就是跟大家聊一下，就是说PPP 政策的一个基本情况，以及近期以来的一个变化。那首先我给大家稍微介绍一下，那我们今天主讲的呢，第一位 Frank Davis 先生，那他呢会是他是在我们的商业法、税法、公司法上呢是有着非常多年的一个经验。那过去呢也在国际企业上呢，就是说帮助了我们的国际企业，特别是近10年以来的中国企业，在保驾护航，然后做了非常多这方面的一个落地呀、商业啊等方面的一个工作。另外一位主讲人呢，我们的 Perry McLennan 先生呢，他呢是我们这边的劳工律师，那在他也是非常获得了全美年轻律师之星的荣耀。那他在过去呢也是帮助了我们多的当地以及国际企业在劳工各方面的一个纠纷案呐，或者HR 方面啊等等各个方面都做出了一个大量的一个协助。那因为这次的一个疫情，在 small business 的发生的时候呢，他也是协助了很多的企业呢，对最新的PPP 的一个贷款的一个政策上面有非常多的了解以及协助。
All right.
Just for a second. Kitty, can you see anyone online?
We definitely have people. The people are asking questions.
Okay, because from the WeChat it's showing tomorrow.这个在座的各位因为我这边看不到这个大家是不是在这个在群里面，所以大家能在这个微信里面跟我说一下在不在，在的话，不然的话，对，好吧。Just bear me a second. Let me make sure.
17 participants currently.
Okay, perfect. Okay, sorry. Let me continue. Okay. Sorry, Keith, do you mind to put the page back a little bit because I'm still trying to translate Frank's words. OK， 好，行，那大家在线就行。那我接着讲啊，所以说我们今天的这个情况呢，就是首先呢，我这个 Perry 呢会给大家讲一下这个 PPP 政策的一个概况以及的一个设置的一个情况。那第二个呢，就是说，然后之后呢，会有我们 Frank 先生呢，他会跟大家说一下这个近期的，特别是在这个周一下午，他们紧急做出来的一个公告和修正。这样子大家可以有进一步的了解。那如果在之后大家有时间的话，大家有任何的疑问，也欢迎大家跟我们提问。这个我们会这个尽我们的全力来帮助大家答疑解惑。如果有事后在这个演讲之后呢，又想到一些其他方面的问题，也欢迎使用这个 Zoom， 它有一个 Q&A 的一个页面，大家也欢迎大家呢去使用那个上面，无论是用中文用英文都可以向我们提问，我们这边呢也会尽快的联系你，尽快的帮助大家解决这个方面的一个疑问，好吧？
Okay, Ben. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. As Frank mentioned, our focus today is on the Paycheck Protection Program, which is part of the stimulus bill that U.S. Congress quickly passed in response to the coronavirus. The purpose of the law is to provide relief to small businesses and to their workers quickly. And the way that the program does that is through forgivable loans. And the idea of the program is for businesses to use the loan funds provided through banks in order to keep workers employed. And in order to keep workers employed at or near the current wage levels. So the idea is to incentivize businesses to not lay off workers or not reduce compensation for workers during this time. The loan funds are to be used primarily for payroll. At least 75% of the loan funds must be used on payroll, and the other 25% can be used for limited other purposes, such as rent, interest on mortgage, utilities, and things like that. But the primary purpose of the program and most of the loan funds should be used for payroll. The loans are to be forgiven based upon the percentage of workforce retained during the period, which we'll discuss. And important to note that the loan terms are very favorable for businesses, even if amounts are not forgiven.
首先这个我们先来说一下这个工资保护的这么一个计划，也就是我们一直在说的这个 PPP 计划。那 PPP 计划呢是这个样子，是我们的这个美国联邦政府是我们的这个小企业这个组织经由联邦政府拨款，然后给美国的在美国的企业 做的这么的一个支持计划。那首先大家可能说都是非常感兴趣的，就是说在现在这个疫情特别严重的一个情况，它的一个主要目的就是为了保护小企业的那些员工，希望支持小企业，让他们不要去这个解聘，或者说这个解聘这些员工的一个政策。那首先里面特别吸引大家的一点呢，就是说是免偿还的、可免除的那一部分的贷款。那大家可能已经从各个方面的渠道已经知道了。那这个可以免除的贷款当中呢，里面有75%是这个员工的平均工资。那还有25%呢，会是我们所有的这个基本设施的一个费用，无论是这个房租啊、水电煤啊、网络啊等等这些基本费用的25%。那具体的这个费用这一块呢，我们等会儿也会这个进行一个详说。所以这就是一个但是哪怕没有这一块，就是说可免除的这一块，其实整个这个新的这个贷款政策，对我们的各大企业来说，都是一个非常好的、有利的一个贷款的一个政策。
Keely, can you go to the next slide?
Perry?
Yeah, Keely, can you go to the next slide, please? All right, so the first thing we'll talk about is who is eligible to participate in this program. And Frank is going to discuss at the end particular rules for affiliated entities and foreign-owned companies. But generally speaking, the program is aimed at small and mid-sized businesses. The law defines those as follows. A small business under the traditional Small Business Administration standards. If you go back one slide, as well as those businesses with 500 or less employees. So the 500 or less employees is the general rule. Some specific industries under the SBA standards are eligible pursuant to specific industry codes, but the general rule is 500 or less employees. Keely, could you go back to the eligibility slide if possible? One more. Well, since we're on it, I can, Ben, go ahead and you can go ahead and translate that part.
Okay, so 那我们先来说一下这个 PPP 政策的一个基本定义啊。基本定义就是说，怎么样？基本定义就是这个政策是给予在美国的中小企业。那中小企业的一个定义呢，就是说，他们这边的一个定义呢，我知道在过去的2周内有很多的一个变动啊，但它现在的一个基本变动，基本定义就是说，你在美国的公司拥有员工小于500人，这个是一个基本定义。当然，它里面还有像我看到昨天群里面也说到有一部分的一个例外啊什么的，但是500人是他们的一个基本定义。
All right. So, Keely, we're showing the eligible business slide. If you could go to the next one, that would be helpful. And the next slide will be a discussion of how to use or how much money you can request for the loan. And the amount of money that you can request is based upon a formula, which is the lesser of $10 million or your average monthly payroll cost during the prior year times 2.5. So for most businesses, it is going to be this average monthly payroll cost times 2.5. And the reason the law is set up this way is because the idea behind it is to essentially provide 2 months of payroll costs to keep your workers employed for a 2-month period after you receive the loan funds. So I have an example on the slide. If the employer had an average monthly payroll of $900,000 over the prior year, and most businesses are using the calendar year 2019, although there is the ability to use a slightly different date for that from March 19 to April 2020. If the employer had an average monthly payroll of $900,000, it would be eligible for a loan of $2.25 million.
OK， 那我们现在就我们刚刚提到说它的一个对小企业的一个基本定义是500人以下。那还有一条基本定义呢，就是说我们的企业必须要在2020年2月15号之前要开始生产运营，并且已经开始支付这个工资税。这些是他们给予的这个基本定义，这些企业符合这2条定义的企业才有权利去申请。那我们现在来说一下这个对于这个款项金额的一个计算方法。首先这个它有2种。你的这个费用呢，你的这个资金呢，将会是你的平均过去1年平均月工资花费的，然后乘以2.5倍，或者这个就是1000万美金，10个 million 是1000万美金，所以就是无论是哪个更高。就是我们都应该去，所以我们自己要做一个基本的一个计算，无论哪个高我们就去申请哪个。那这边呢，就是给大家也列了一个例子，就比如说我们的公司，就是说它每个月，它在过去1年，2019年每个月的工资花费是90万，那么它有权利去申请的这个贷款金额。将会是225万，也就是我们的90万每个月，然后乘以平均每个月90万的这个工资乘以这个2.5倍。
Okay, so once a business receives the loan proceeds, there are rules about how to use the money that you receive. And eligible expenses, as I mentioned, include payroll, which has to be at least 75%, certain insurance, rent, interest, and utilities. The one key piece here is that you've got an 8-week, 2-month period after the loan origination to spend the money. And again, it's the idea here is to, once you receive the money, start paying employees with those funds for a 2-month period. And if employees have previously been laid off or furloughed, you can rehire those employees with the loan proceeds. I've got the qualifying costs up there. We'll talk about the forgiveness in a minute. If the money is spent on these eligible costs, then all of it is eligible for forgiveness as long as you follow these rules. We'll talk in a minute about the reduction in forgiveness, but if you spend the money on these specific things during that 8-week period, 100% of the money will be eligible for forgiveness. If not forgiven, the loans have very favorable loan terms, and we have some updated information that has just recently come out that's a little bit different than what is on this slide. The law stated that there's going to be a maximum of a 10-year loan with a 4% interest rate. I think the interest rates have been more like around 1% with a 2-year loan period. So that has been a recent update. And again, that is just for those amounts which are not forgiven.
那这个贷款的这个使用以及这个清除以及这个可免除这一块，我们现在来说一下啊。那首先是这个贷款的这个额度这个贷款的这个花费呢，是里面将会这个包含，就是说我们之前说过这个75%的这个员工的这个工资，8周的工资，以及保险。这个房子的这个租金然后如果说这个租金有任何的利息，以及我们的水电煤等等这方面的一个费用，都是会在他认可的花费当中。我们等会儿会更加详细的说一下免除的这一块费用。但它的一个基本定义呢，就是说当你开始你的贷款的时候，那你就要开始把你之前的这个停止带薪的员工呢就叫回来，开始这个发他们工资，发他们这个8周，也就是2个月的这个工资。然后这个花费呢，然后这个费用呢，到时候呢也会去做一个审核，去决定说会不会是一个可免除的一个费用。然后我们来Kitty, do you mind go back, please? Sorry, I was on the middle. Yes, please. Thank you. 然后呢，接下来一条呢，就是说，那如果说在我们发工资的这一个期间，我们没有发够，就比如说我们当时报出来说，比如说员工是9万，结果最后这个因为种种原因，我们只发了8万块钱。那最后在这个与银行算这个可免除金额的时候，这一块免除的这一块也会有一个相应的一个折扣。所以说我们在前期的就是说做计算的时候，就是说各位都要做好这方面的一个仔细的一个计算。最后一个呢，就是说在不能免除的这个剩下来的那一部分的贷款将会在2020年12月31号，就是说自动进入了一个贷款的一个节奏。我知道现在这个表格上面写的是10年4%，然后是10年的一个还款，但是我们这个是3月27号的版本。在周一下午的时候，他们做了一个更正。我相信这个现在呢应该是一个2年的贷款，但是这个利息率呢应该是1%。Perry, please.
Okay, so the primary benefit, one of the primary benefits of the program is the loan forgiveness piece. And as I mentioned, if you spend the loan funds appropriately, all of the amounts that you spend are eligible for forgiveness. Your forgiveness can be reduced if you reduce your workforce or reduce compensation levels for your workforce up to a certain level. And there's a very specific formula that will be used for determining the forgiveness amount, the forgiveness reduction amount. So what they will do is they will look at your average monthly payroll numbers, both in headcount and compensation during the 8-week period that you spent the money, the 8-week loan period, and they will compare that to the first quarter of 2019 or the first quarter of 2020. And that is the business's choice which number to use. And so the choice there will establish your baseline number, and then you will compare that to your head count and compensation during the 8-week period. Now, if you do have slightly lower employment numbers during the 8-week period, your forgiveness will just be reduced proportionally on the head count. You will not lose the entire forgiveness. And then if you reduce compensation, you've got a 25% compensation cushion if you do need to reduce compensation. In other words, as long as you don't reduce compensation by more than 25%, you're okay. There won't be any effect on your forgiveness. If you reduce it by more than 25%, each dollar over 25% that you have reduced it will be a dollar for dollar reduction in your loan forgiveness. So the compensation piece is a little bit different than the headcount piece. The compensation piece is a dollar for dollar reduction, whereas the headcount piece is an actual percentage reduction. You do have until June 30th, 2020 to rehire folks if you have already laid folks off. But again, you really need to be rehiring those folks immediately once you receive the loan funds in order to really take advantage of the forgiveness.
我们现在来聊一下这个补偿的可以免除的这个费用啊。我们刚刚简短的聊到了这个他会如何去做这个最后的一个可减免的一个这一块呢？实施后呢会有会过来我们会需要提交证据，那他们呢也会去做一个对比。那对比呢是基于2块，一块呢是就是他会去比较你当时的这个2019或者2020年第1季度的员工人数和平均工资，然后去比较你这个8周，就是说当你的这个补偿金到的时候，你的贷款到的时候，你要马上开始付你员工的这个8周的这个薪水，他会去做一个对比。那提醒大家注意的是，里面有一个25%的空间，就是说，如果说你打个比方说，当时你招了100个员工，那最后因为种种原因，你让这个75个员工回来上班。那这个就是我们所谓的这个25%的这个空间，就是说你的这个偿还的金额，就是你可以减免的金额，它是不会去取消你的。但是另外一个就是说是我们的一个补偿这一块，那在这一块呢，就是说它到时候也是会有，但是一旦超过25%了，到时候会有一个1比1的一个一个费用的一个就是说就是这个就是说1块钱对1块钱的这个费用会回收，所以说这一块呢，就是说希望大家可以了解一下，然后在做这个计算的时候，就是尽量就是说，以及在最后实施的时候这个控制在这个25%以内。Yes, please.
Okay, so this slide contains more specific information about how you calculate the loan forgiveness portion. I have already covered most of this information in my prior comments, but this slide is helpful for those of you who maybe are more visual to help figure out. I've got the two different periods up there that you can use. One thing I will point out is that I referred to first quarter 2019 and second quarter of 2020 as your baseline dates. I will point out that it's actually, the actual dates are February 15th through June 30th, 2019, or January 20th to February 2019, 2020. So it's not first quarter as I originally stated. And again, this is your choice, and you should take a look at both of those and determine whichever is less, because that is what you are going to want to use as your baseline number.
这个刚刚说到了这个25%，然后我们也提到了2019或者2020年第一季度的这个表格哈，我这边稍微更正一下，这个实际上是2019年2月15日到6月30日，或者2020年1月1日到2020年的2月29号，这2个时间段，你们可以回去翻一下这个当时的这个记录，看一下这个费用上哪一个少，我们就用哪一个来作为一个公司的一个一个金额，就这个就是说来达到一个就是说一个利益最大化。Yes.
Okay, so if you have portions of the loan that are not forgiven, then obviously those amounts must be paid back. However, they are paid back on favorable terms. And Congress allowed banks, allow the Small Business Administration for loans up to a 10-year term, up to 4% interest, and potential deferral of principal and interest. And since we've received that, the SBA has issued new guidance, as I mentioned earlier, that the loan terms are going to be even more favorable than that. Most of them are at about a 1% interest over a 2-year period. Additionally notable is all of the normal SBA lending requirements are waived. And so the loan, in order to receive the loan, there's no personal guarantees of shareholders or officers of the company. They've waived the normal requirements for collateral. There's no prepayment fee on the loan funds, and none of the normal SBA fees that are associated with a normal Small Business Administration loan, if any of you have utilized those programs before.
Uh, 就是说，关于那对于那些没有办法这个免除的贷款，我们刚刚提到来说，即使是这个不能免除的那一块，其实也是一个非常好的，对我们各大企业来说也是一个非常好的一个政策。刚刚也提到了，就是说在3月27号的时候，他们提出了一个非常优惠的政策，也就是说在10年内将会有一个只有4%的10年的还款。以及只有4%的这个利息，而且呢，这个前6个月到1年是可以免除这个还款以及它的一个免利息的。在周一下午，我们刚刚也提到，它有了一个进一步的一个对我们更加利好的一个政策，也就是说，它可以变成一个2年的还款。那如果是2年的还款呢，它可以达到最低只有1%的利息。所以这个对我们的各大企业而言也是一个非常好的费用。同时呢，它也规定了这个在各个方面上的一个费用上的一个免除，包括了这个不再要求这个个人的，就是说股东啊，或者说这个董事会的一个个人的担保，或者一个抵押，或者一个 SBA 的一个费用所以说这个等等这个方面的一个费用全部被免除，然后它的一个要求对这个贷款人的这个要求，对企业的要求方面也有了一个非常大的一个便利。
Okay, so a couple of points on the SBA application or the application for the PPP program. The borrower does have to make a good faith certification that the funds are needed for COVID-19 related downturn or because the business has suffered negative effects for COVID-19. We've had a few questions from clients about this particular certification, and I think if there's any reasonable basis that your business is going to suffer any downturn in sales or revenue or anything like that, I think you're okay to make that certification. I think basically Congress has taken the position that almost every business in America meets that certification requirements. You do have to also make a certification that the funds will be used to retain workers and that its request is not duplicative with other SBA funds for the same purpose. So if you're seeking a economic injury disaster loan through the SBA or something else, you can't use those funds for the same purpose. As most of you have probably figured out, this loan program is administered through private financial institutions, not directly with the SBA. So if you have not yet applied, apply through an existing banking relationship. If you have one, check to see if your existing banking relationship is accepting applications. I do know that most banks are prioritizing existing customers, so that is important to keep in mind. We may be able to assist you if you, find a potential banker if you are having difficulty on that front. I know that there is been questions about the amount of funding appropriated. We've heard some news that some banks are no longer accepting applications. There have been calls in Congress to even this morning to appropriate more money for this program. So I don't think it's too late if you have not yet applied.
我们现在来聊一聊这个申请表格哈，那是这个我们在申请这个政策的时候，这个贷款的时候，当然就是说我们作为贷款人我们作为借款人，我们需要向他们证明，就是向 SBA Fund 证明说我们这个是有一个，就是说这次的这个疫情，这个 COVID-19 是影响到了我们的一个企业的一个生存不管是就是说，所以说我们要有这么的一个证明，到时候我们要述说。那大家可能会说，那我要怎么去证明？我们可以说因为这次的情况，我们的如果说是工厂的话，那员工的话没有办法上班，对吧？如果说是销售公司的话，我们可以说我们的销售巨减，我们的收入巨减等等，这些都是一个非常现实以及非常好的原因。同时呢，他们到时候像我刚刚也简短的有提到过，他在放款以后如何去决定说到底有多少，到底有多少是可以免除的呢？是会事后呢是会有跟这个租借方，也就是我们的银行呢是会有一个最后的审核以及确认。 这个同时呢，大家也都已经知道了，现在呢是这个我们申请的时候，我们并不是说是直接跟 SBA 去申请，而是说我们是经由我们的这个银行去申请。那现在大多数的银行呢，其实也都已经有了这一个这个贷款的这个 PPP 的这个项目，但是大家可能也会意识到，就是说对于这些银行来说呢，它肯定是优先那些之前跟他们有过贷款关系的银行，这个借款人客户，这个也是因为就是说他们等于是以前已经做过一次审核，不需要再做进一步的审核，但这不代表说我们的企业不能，所以说也是建议跟我们的这个银行，就是说特别是已经是有他们账户的银行尽快的开始讨论这个方面的以及申请这方面问题。如果有些呢对可能说我们周边的银行我们的这个银行啊什么的，就是说不是特别了解，然后有各方面的疑问，也欢迎，因为每个银行的政策不一样，所以他们的要求也不一样也欢迎随时呢来跟我们确认，我们这边呢也会尽我们的力去协助各位呢去做这个跟银行沟通这个去做这方面的一个申请以及协助。最后呢，就是大家也知道说，非常担心说这个，哎呀，我因为现在种种原因，我到现在还没有审批啊，我还没有开始申请啊，会不会太迟啊？那大家可能也已经看到了这个新闻，就是说已经放了250个 billion 的这个费用，再来支持我们这个项目第二批了。但是可以告诉大家的是，哪怕今天早上还有很多各个方面的一个企业也好啊，组织也好啊，给我们的国会这个发邮件、打电话提意见，说需要进一步的放宽，需要再一次的拨款。所以说我们觉得说，无论什么时候先申请，哪怕现在申请都不会太晚。Perry。
Okay, I think I'm done. I think it's Frank's up. Frank, we can't hear you.
Good. Thanks, Perry. I was going to add a few words here on the applicability of the program to foreign-owned businesses, which has been a very fluid situation thus far. The CARES Act itself, which authorized the PPP program, has nothing in it regarding an inability or inapplicability of the program to foreign-owned businesses. Despite that, the initial Treasury guidelines indicated that foreign-owned firms were ineligible for the PPP program. It defined that essentially as more than 20% ownership meant that companies were not eligible. In addition, and this is in keeping with the standard SBA affiliation rules, all worldwide jobs of affiliated companies needed to be included in determining whether or not you were a small business and having 500 or fewer employees. As I say, that was the initial position. Keely, if you'll go to the next slide. As of April 7th, the current Treasury position is any company with 500 or fewer affiliated employees with a principal place of residence in the U.S. is eligible, and that's regardless of whom it is owned by. That guidance is contained in the SBA's frequently asked questions, which were published on April 7th, and is, as of this morning, to my knowledge, still good guidance. In addition, this includes all affiliated U.S. employees, which means if there are a number of related companies, generally think 50% or more control, there's a series of tests, but if they're under common control, those must all be counted in determining whether you have 500 or fewer affiliated employees. Ben?
Kitty, do you mind to go back to the last page?
Sure. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. 好，那这个刚刚呢，就是 Perry 给我们大概的讲了一下这个政策的一个基本情况，以及它的一个限制，以及它的一个就是说如何去计算。那我们现在就是说 Frank 现在来跟我们说一下这个在过去1周吧，就是说它有的一个变动。首先就是说是这个大家都非常开心的都已经知道了哈，就是现在呢已经是完全对我们外企，就是说海外投资美国，在美国有工厂或者公司的企业已经是完全开放了。第二个，它不再要求这个美国企业这个或者说这个外资企业必须要有20%的这个美国人或者绿卡人员的这个股份了，这个也已经不再要求了。那第三个就是说，我们之前非常担心的就是说，他把他的500人的计算方法是把我们海外的这个分公司之类的全部算进去了。那现在很高兴的告诉大家，这一条也已经废除了，就是说已经不再去计算我们海外的这个工人的元数了。Kitty, please, next page. Thank you. 同时呢，那个就是说，这个500，那所以说我们在这个周一的政策上，这个他做了一个改动的一个政策，对于这个500人的这个政策，就是说，像我刚刚说的，首先他就确定说，只规定美国所有公司在美国的所有的公司的人员加起来是这个不超过500人，这个同时呢，这个也不包含这个海外的员工，这是它的一个新的一个基本定义。
Then there is the final item on the previous page is that under the current construction, we believe that you're not required to include foreign affiliate employees in that calculation. This is a big change because many of our foreign clients, both Chinese, Japanese, European, could not worldwide had more than 500 employees, and so the initial belief was that they were ineligible. We believe, based on the new guidance that has some language in there that we'll get to in a minute that allows one to rely on it, that it is only the U.S. resident employees that are counted for this purpose, although, as I said, all U.S. affiliates must be aggregated in determining whether or not you reach that 500 level. But currently, we believe the guidance is that you do not need to count foreign affiliates employees.
所以这个我们也知道，之前那个我们如果说他算得上海外的员工的话，其实我们大多数的中国企业在这里的中国企业都是不合规定的。不要说中国企业，其实大多数的外国企业、国际企业都是不符合规定的。所以在我们各方这个强烈的抗议下，我们非常高兴，这个周一的更正的时候，他已经修改了这一条。所以说现在的这个政策呢，就已经是支持我们绝大多数的这个企业让我们的企业得利。
Next slide, please. As I said at the beginning of this, now back one, please, Keely. The situation is fluid. There are also final rules which were issued about the same time by the U.S. Treasury Department, which have some conflicting instructions, which are probably beyond the scope of this discussion in terms of complexity, but basically they seem to indicate that in addition to having the eligibility for 500 or fewer U.S. employees, that you also had to qualify as a small business concern, which is a defined term, which was what was hanging up many companies before. That's clearly inconsistent with the SBA's frequently asked questions. The reason that we believe that the best guidance right now is that the SBA interpretation that it's just the U.S. is a good faith supportable position for the company to take, is because of this language on this slide in the SBA guidance, which says borrowers and lenders may rely on the guidance provided in this document as SBA's interpretation of the CARES Act. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm going to read the bottom, which says the U.S. government will not challenge lender PPP actions that conform to this guidance and to the PPM interim final rule and any subsequent rulemaking in effect at the time. There's a tension between these two. However, based on a survey of about 8 or 9 clients who are somewhere in the process of applying for these things and a number of different bankers, we believe that based on the SBA frequently asked questions and this language, that most lenders and borrowers are proceeding on the understanding that as long as you have 500 or fewer affiliated U.S. resident employees, they will accept and process the applications. Then.
Yes. So what does this really pointing out?
It's pointing out that they've told you in this Q&A that you don't have, it specifically says you don't need to be a small business concern, which is a defined term, that any company with 500 or fewer U.S. resident employees is eligible for the program.
Okay. 就是说在周一的时候呢，他另外提到一点，就是说，因为就大家知道，就是说，在这个 SBA， 就是说这个小企业这个组织的它里面呢，协会呢，它原本是对这个小企业的定义其实是有一些不一样的，所以他在周一下午的这个就是公布的时候呢，公布更新的时候呢，他同时也提到了，就是说他不再就是说强制于一定要是他原先定义的小企业的这个规定，而是说只要你的企业是没有超过500人，他就可以去做这个这样的一个申请。这个因为这个，然后这个大家可以在这个屏幕上看到的这个呢，是一个比较官方的一个法律方面的一个，就是说他当时写出来的一个回复。所以我刚刚特地再问了一下我们的这个Frank 先生，就是说让他做一个比较通俗的，我们大家可以听明白的一个版本，就是简单来说就是就是我们只需要记住，就是说500人以下，在这个案子中，在这个贷款中，它就会被定义为就是说是可以申请的。
Great. Next slide, please, Keela. Back one. Yeah. So one of the things I would stress is that I've probably now seen 8 or 9 different banks, programs, and applications on this, and none of them are the same. In some cases, they're imposing requirements that I have not seen in the Act or in any of the regulations. But generally, we think that there's specific guidance which gives you a good faith basis to move forward on this. It doesn't mean things aren't going to change. It doesn't mean that there won't be an interpretation that will be challenged. But because the program is first come, first serve, and we believe will be fully subscribed, that is, all of the funds that have been allocated, the current, I believe, $357 billion and the additional $250 billion or so that they're now talking about adding to the program will likely all be used under the program, and it is first come, first serve. We believe that the best advice for clients is to get in the queue, as it were, make the application, and have the loans processed. There's specific hangups, I know, in which, banks are asking for, certain information, or may say, well, we need in order to be the applicant, you have to own a certain amount of the company. We also are seeing banks that are never mentioning that in dealing with foreign-owned companies, and the officers of the companies are signing in the same way they would for any other loan. So there's a broad variation between the banks on how they're interpreting this. I would consult the lenders with whom I have a relationship and go ahead and get an application in. If you're having trouble doing it yourself, we're now working with a lot of our clients and facilitating with the banks and helping them understand what the actual guidance of the act is, because many of them are have not had time to actually read and sort through it, and so are moving as fast as everyone else is. But the bottom line is different bank programs are requiring different things, but it's important to try and identify a lender that you can work with and go ahead and get an application in and get in the queue, and if you need it, get good legal help.
我们在这里呢，希望跟大家说的这个就是说，每一个银行，就大家可能也已经发现了，就是每一个银行，它对这个特别是我们海外企业、我们外企的这个要求都是不一样的，他们自己的表格也是不一样的。我们最近在接触客户的时候，我们已经遇到大概7到8个不同的一个版本的一个申请表了，光是表就不一样，然后要求也会完全的不一样。所以这个呢，说实话，就是并没有一个完整的一个答案是可以给我们抄的，因为每个银行的一个情况都是不一样的，要求也都是完全不一样的。但是就是说，大家也知道，虽然说就是直到今天，直到现在都还有各方面的人再去跟这个议会国会去谈，说要再进一步的这个放款，但是我们也不知道说会不会有下一批，所以我们还是建议大家呢，就是说跟您的银行就是赶紧做一个交流。如果需要如果跟银行交流中出现了各种各样的问题，不管说是这个各个方面有任何的问题，我们也欢迎说随时这个来咨询我们，然后让我们介入，然后来协助您去完成这个这次非常利好的一个贷款的一个政策。因为因为他们银行的政策肯定就是说是先来先得，然后放款放完了，这个事情对他们而言就已经结束了。所以我们也是希望说各位企业呢，就是不要错过这一个利好的一个情况。
Good. Yes, and the two, I think we've addressed both of the specific Q&As that I've seen submitted in written form. One asked about they were being told that it required a 10% or more ownership interest in order to be the applicant for the loan and actually sign for the loan. We believe that is likely a requirement of the individual bank as opposed to anything imposed by the program. I've not seen anything in the program. We'll be happy to look at anything that is specific to that. The second addressed the confusion between do you need to be a small business concern or not. In the final rules, there's a discussion that appears to say you both have to say have 500 and qualify as a small business concern, but there's more specific guidance in the FAQs put out by the SBA, which allow you to specifically rely on them, in which the answer to the question is, do I need to be a small business concern, is no. So we believe that in that case, you can rely, but it's not free from doubt, but you have a good faith basis to move forward, taking them at their word that you don't also have to be a small business concern, but merely have to be a company with 500 or fewer employees whose principal place of residence is the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
And our information is at the end of these materials, and feel free to contact us and let us know how we can support you in these interesting times. I think the program is an ambitious one, and it is being rolled out at a very fast speed for the government, and thus there are going to be some fits and starts, as we say in English, particularly as it relates to foreign companies, but we look forward to the opportunity to work with you on achieving your goals regarding this program.
我们在这个刚刚我们看了一下这个这个提问答这一块啊，就是说我这个之前我们群里面也非常关心的，就是说我们的申请人是不是必须要是拥有10%的这个公司股份额才能有这个申请？但是我们是100%全资的中国企业，这个怎么办？我们因为到现在为止，我们已经接触了大概8、9个不同的银行的一个版本，像我刚刚说的，我们相信是这个应该是只有这个银行提出了这样的一个要求，因为这个银行跟银行之间的一个要求都是不一样的，所以我们会建议呢，就是说这个您也可以就是说去咨询一下其他方，或者说您可以这个。如果需要的话，我们也在去跟这个银行的一个相关的这个人员呢，做一个更加具体的一个面谈，看能不能有一个其他方面的一个材料的一个递交来证明其他的一个来让他变得就是说这个了解这样的一个情况。然后另外一个呢，也是提到了这个关于这个小企业的一个定义。那我们这个之前也已经提到了，就是说它现在呢其实已经放宽了对这个小企业的一个定义，一个基本原则就是一个这个就是你在每企业的员工小于500人，就是它就会定义为你是有这个权利去申请的。当然我们昨天也提到了。这个那有些企业可能说是超过500人了，那我们是不是就是不符合要求了？那这种情况呢，就是说我们昨天也有专业人士也提到了就是只要它的这个它的官网上有一个非常详细的 FAQ， 就是一个提问和回答，就是里面也定义了，就是说在部分它规定的这个行当中。这个就不会有这个500的限制，但是对于我们大多数的企业来说，500人是一个他们的一个基本限制，好吧？
Thank you for your time today, and everybody stay safe.
好，那我们这边呢，就是我们的今天的一个讲座那这个如果大家有任何的这个事后有任何的问题，这边也可以看到，欢迎大家随时的来问我，或者问我们的 Frank and Carrie 这个或者说如果觉得说中文英文都可以这个欢迎就是说我们大家都是可以顺利利了拿到最大的这个企业的这个方面的一个这个贷款，好吧？谢谢大家。
Thanks for joining this webinar presented by Hainsworth Sinclair Boyd. To learn more about the firm and its services, visit hsblawfirm.com.